Okay guys, so I'm going to talk about the practice assignment I'm going to talk about question 3 specifically. It says research has suggested that iPhones now represent less than 55% of the phone market. Conduct a binomial test using the phone type variable to test this claim. Provide the relevant output and write the report for your test in the style presented in the course materials. By style presented in the course materials, we mean that you need to find some model reports in the textbook and use those model reports as a guide to how you will write the reports for your assignment. So for example, for the binomial test on page 53, there's an outline of how to write a model report. So you start with a research question or hypothesis, and that's always going to be the case. For all reports, they follow a similar format. So start with a research question or hypothesis. Give information about the sample, so how many people in the sample, and describe the sample. State whether the test is significant or not and the type of test used, and provide the statistics. Include an interpretation of the 95% confidence interval, which is not actually given to us in SPSS for the binomial test. We have to get it from elsewhere, but I'll show you how to do that. And finish with a conclusion. And then on page 52 and page 54, there is an example of an actual report. But we're going to show you how to write the report for the binomial test anyway. So here's an actual example report. But first of all, let's start with the analysis. So we're looking at the phone type variable here. Because it's a binomial test, it's obviously going to be a categorical variable, because that's what we use for binomial. We use the binomial test for categorical variables. So looking at information about the variable, 1 equals iPhone, 2 equals Android. So to run the test, we go to Analyze, Non-Parametric Tests, Legacy Dialogues, Binomial. The phone type, let me just reset this. Phone type, you need to pop phone type in here. Now the test proportion is set to 50 as a default, but we're actually testing against 55 because the hypothesis is, the reference proportion is 55% because the hypothesis is that iPhone usage is less than 55%. So that's what we're testing our sample against, is that 55% reference. The cut point will be 1 because our iPhone is group 1, so that's what we're comparing the rest of the sample to, group 1. So we press OK. Here's our result. So you can see group 1, the iPhone group, the proportion is 60%. This is obviously higher than the test proportion. You can also see here that the p-value is greater than 0.05. So the p-value is not significant, which means that our sample, there is no evidence that our sample has come from a population with the iPhone proportion of less than 55%. So we need to write that up into a report. How are we going to do that? In the solutions document, you'll see the results have been copied and pasted from SPSS, that's here. So you can to do that, you can actually go right click, go copy special, and if you select image rather than these, press OK, you will be able to actually copy and paste that table. So here's our actual report. So we start with our hypothesis. So it was hypothesized that less than 55% of Australians now own iPhones, or it was hypothesized that the phone market share for iPhones is now less than 55%, or something like that. That reflects the hypothesis. Describe the sample, provide the number and description. So in a sample of 30 cell phone, 30 equals n equals 30, which is from here, n equals 30. In a sample of 30 cell phone owners in Australia, so cell phone owners in Australia is describing the sample, and 30 is the sample size. So we do hypothesis, describe the sample. In a sample of 30 cell phone owners in Australia, 60% owned an iPhone. So we give the sample statistics and compare this to the reference proportion. So 60% owned an iPhone, and this is higher than the previously reported figure of 55%. We then provide the test used and the results of the test. So however, a binomial test indicates that this difference is not significant. N equals 30, P equals P equals 3.59. So the type of test used, the results of the test is not significant, and then the supporting statistics. So the N equals 30 is from here, as I already told you, P equals 0.359. We then need to provide a confidence interval. The confidence interval is not provided in SPSS. So you need to actually get that from Blackboard. So if you go into Blackboard, press Data Files and Calculator, And in there you will find an applet or an Excel document. If you download the Excel document, some of you might need to actually go to formulas, calculation options, and make sure it's highlighted on automatic. And then you can put your proportion in here, 0.6. N is 30, press enter, and you get your confidence interval. So this is the interval within which we can be confident the actual population proportion from which our sample sits. So our sample comes from a population with a proportion of iPhone owners between 42% and 78%. That's what that tells us. So you can see this interval actually contains 55%, the reference proportion. So we cannot be confident that our sample comes from a population with a proportion that is less than 55%, because our confidence interval includes 55%. So our sample might come from a population that includes 55%, but it also might come from a population anywhere that has a proportion anywhere between 42 and 78%. So our sample actually provides us no evidence to support or reject the hypothesis. So we write the 95% confidence interval, which indicates that between 42% and 78% of phone owners are iPhones. Of phones owned are iPhones, and then we give a conclusion. There is insufficient evidence. So whenever you have a non-significant p-value, you conclude with there is insufficient evidence to conclude that the market share for iPhones is less than 55%. And that's your report. Now, note that when the 95% confidence interval and the conclusion are actually about the population, so you need to provide those in present tense. Most of the report is about the sample. It's what you did with the sample, so it's in past tense. The confidence interval and the conclusion are in present tense. This might seem like a really minor point, but it will show that you understand that this is inferential statistics. We're actually using a sample to draw conclusions about a population. So make sure you get your tense correct when writing your report. All the best. Good luck.